Hey, welcome to another video from SkinnyMedic. I had a request from a friend of mine who does firearm training classes to do a how-to video on how to use an IFAK, how to use a trauma kit. He teaches a lot of firearms classes and he wants to start incorporating some medical training in the class. So I asked him what supplies to use and he said he uses the cat tourniquet, Israeli pressure bandage, of course compressed gauze, combat gauze, and the hyphen chest seals and MPA in his kits for his class. So those are the items I'm going to be using in this particular video. I'm going to show you how to use them and which order you want to use them in. Alright, so we're going to be using the March algorithm to treat our patient. So the first thing in the March algorithm is to control major hemorrhaging. So we're going to use the cat tourniquet, we've got an Israeli bandage there, and we've got some combat gauze we're going to use to control major hemorrhaging. Then you go to A, which is airway. So we're going to use the MPA, show you how to insert that to support someone's airway. And then we go to breathing, so I'm going to use the hyphen chest seals to show you that. And then the second part of that is circulation, so we can, if we had some way to start IVs, things like that, or we can do replace blood cells if you are equipped to do that, but obviously most people are not. And then H is for heat loss and head injury, so we can cover them with a survival blanket if we need to. But this particular video, we're going to be focusing on the controlling major hemorrhaging, and then of course the airway and breathing part of this. So, and of course, here's our victim we're going to be using. Alright, so the first part of our process here, we want to look for major hemorrhaging, major bleeding. So you've got to expose the patient. If you don't have them exposed, you can't see. You may see like a large pool of blood up underneath them or running out, obviously. So we're looking for major bleeding. This is going to be bright red blood squirting or just uncontrolled bleeding that we believe is life-threatening. You're not worried about abrasions, things like that. So you want to, of course, run down, starting from the head, do a head-to-toe exam real quick. My head's gone, but we'll pretend there's a head here. So run through the head, looking for the abdomen, chest, abdomen, running through the legs, and then rotate the arms. We can also roll our patient here and checking the backside, make sure there's no uncontrolled bleeding that we're looking for. If we do find some major bleeding, let's say this leg has bright red blood squirting out from it, then the best point to do is to put a knee into the groin. If you have an arm, then you can put a knee into the shoulder here, but put a knee into the groin. That's going to kind of slow down the bleeding. It may stop it, but it's going to slow it down while you get your tourniquet ready. So we're going to use the Gen 7 cat tourniquet here. Put it on several inches above the wound. Pull this band, elastic band here, tight, as if you're trying to cut off blood flow here. And then we spin the windlass until bleeding is stopped. Now I usually take and tuck the tail in just to kind of keep it nice and neat, pull the time stamp over and note the time. Now you should have bleeding controlled at this point. If for some reason you don't, you can apply a second tourniquet up higher, close to the torso, to apply the second tourniquet. So the problem comes in when you're doing your exam. Obviously we've controlled major hemorrhaging for an extremity, but if you find major bleeding into the shoulders and groin here, you cannot put a tourniquet up high enough, then we have to do wound packing and use a compression bandage, things like that. So you do have a major artery that runs right through here, major artery that runs right through here, so you can get bright red blood squirting out of these wounds, and you can't obviously put a tourniquet up high enough to get to them. So we can still do the direct pressure to hold as much pressure as we can, but we're going to start wound packing this. If you can, try to get a knee up close to the injury site to kind of slow down the bleeding, but obviously you wouldn't want to put your knee on the patient's chest or throat area, just depending on where the bleeding's at. My mannequin's really small, so kind of have to do that. So we're going to use the combat gauze to wound pack this. Easiest way I've found to do this is just tie a knot in the end of it. So we're trying to put a knee to hold pressure down here, and this finger goes into the wound, and you got to find that artery, you got to find the source of the bleeding. So it doesn't matter where you're at on that, you stick your finger down, you may have to try to find it, but once you find that source of bleeding, and then you would put this to the source. Put this finger here, this finger comes in, goes right back on top of that source, and this goes in here, here, and here. So then, for sake of time, we wound pack this entire shoulder area here. with the combat gauze. Get it all into the wound. We're going to hold pressure for about 3 to 5 minutes. So firm, direct pressure, put all your body weight here to hold it. Make sure you can get in there. Now, normally we don't remove gauze once we try to put gauze on here, but for the sake of the hemostatic agent, they recommend that if you hold pressure for 3 to 5 minutes, you still get some bleeding coming through here, then they recommend to pull this back out and to repack it, either with some fresh combat gauze if you've got it, hopefully. So, because you didn't get it to the source. So if you had to continue bleeding after 3 to 5 minutes, we would wound pack this again and get this all there and secured. All right, so what I normally try to do is wound pack the wound first with combat gauze, Celox, hemostatic agent, to get it to the source of bleeding first. If I have a large wound and I need more than one gauze, then I can usually use regular compressed gauze here to backfill it. Now, if all you have is the compressed gauze, absolutely, you can use that just like we use the combat gauze here. So if you're using a non-hemostatic agent gauze, you really need to hold it for 5 minutes. If you're using hemostatic agent, the 3-minute mark should be good. But if non-hemostatic agent, you're gonna be 5 minutes there. So now we've got all this gauze packed here and we need to keep it in place. So that's where we would use our Israeli bandage, is to hold this in place. All right, this is a little difficult on my little mannequin guy here, but you guys can get the idea. So Israeli bandage. Okay, this is a 6-inch bandage. There's our 5x9 that's supposed to be sterile. So this is our wound here. Wrap it. Now I usually don't use the pressure plate here when I'm just using it as a wound packing cover here. So this is going to hold pressure. We've already got bleeding controlled. We're just trying to keep all this controlled. So I start here. I normally lift this patient's arm up. This is so when I go up under the armpit, when they lower it down, it will actually pull more pressure onto the wound. So here, you can wrap it around. Now just be careful not to get it too tight because you don't want to impede the breathing process going across the chest here. If you have to, you can go up under the arm, however you want to do this. And then we can secure it. Now, of course, you can use a pressure bandage on the extremities. If you see some bleeding, but it's not necessarily an arterial bleed, and you don't think it needs a tourniquet, you can use a pressure bandage, things like that. All right, so this is the M portion, the major hemorrhaging part of the March algorithm. We've controlled major hemorrhage on the extremity and axillary here showing in the shoulder. So now we will move on to airway. So for this portion here, we're gonna have to pretend that my patient has a head, obviously. So this MPA is a number 28. You find it in most of your trauma kits. That's the normal size, the average size for an adult. It goes in to protect someone's airway. So meaning that they are unconscious or semi-conscious. And then we can put this, it goes into their nose, goes behind their tongue, misses the gag reflex, which is important, and opens their airway for them, keeps it open. So take a little closer look at this. All right. I'm not going to insert this into my nose, but you can see typically we go to the right nair. It goes into the nose. You'd want to lubricate this, by the way. So it's a lubrication like KY or blood, anything like that, because this is a rubber texture. So it's got to be lubrication, makes it a lot easier to go in. So it goes into the nose. You can kind of tilt the patient's head back into a sniffing position. This inserts into the nose, and you push this all the way in until it buries into the nose. This is the only part here that's going to be sticking out. Typically to use the right nair, but insert this bevel, hopefully that picks up on camera, bevel towards the middle of the nose, insert, and push it all the way in. This is going to protect someone's airway. All right, so we're going to use our imagination here, kids, and I've got the MPA placed inside our patient. He's not doing so well, but we're going to take good care of him. All right, so the next part of this, we've got M, we've got A taken care of. So now we're on to R, which is respiratory. So we're going to use the hyphen chest seals in this example here. These are the vented chest seals. These normally do come in a dual pack here, so you get an entry and an exit wound here for our patient. Now, we do not wound pack the thoracic cavity here. So how we wound pack this is just for the shoulder, okay? You're wound packing the shoulder muscle, things like that, because you're using the muscle as far as your cavity for your pocket. Once we start getting into the middle of the abdomen and for the chest, you're just not going to do any good. You're just going to push things around and you're not going to actually push them against anything. We're pushing the artery here up against a bone or muscle, things like that, to try to create that pocket here, the cavity that we're going to use it for. So, but here there's nothing to push against. Everything just moves around. So the best thing we can do here is seal it up. So we're going to use the hyphen chest seals here. This is the vented, like I said. So they come in dual pack. So this is going to be for penetrating trauma. So we've got a hole in the chest that we want to seal up so it doesn't become a tension pneumothorax. So we pull the red tab. It does come with a little bit of a 4x4 here. That way if you need to wipe off the chest area, you can wipe it off. Let me undo this. There's really bandage real quick. All right, so we're gonna say we have an injury to the chest here. Then we use that 4x4. If you had to wipe a little bit of blood away, I've found that you really don't need to. This is gonna stick through blood, hair, things like that. This just have the channels here. That's gonna help air, blood release from the thoracic cavity to vent. So you pull the red tab. These are super sticky and sticks on, okay? Ready to go. Now, because we have an entry hole, we want to log roll the patient and make sure there's nothing on the back side as well. If there were something on the back side, then we pull another one out, pull the red tab again, and slap it on here. Now, your patient it's not going to vent back here because your patient is laying flat. So the only one that's actually going to vent is the one on the front. So get that taken care of. Now we have massive bleeding taken care of, we have the airway taken care of, and now we have breathing taken care of. So now that we have the massive bleeding taken care of, we have an airway taken care of, and now we have breathing taken care of, we could use a Mylar space blanket or any kind of blanket, things like that, to keep the patient warm. Another thing you can do while you're waiting on EMS to come is to put the patient in the recovery position. So if the patient vomits here, or you've got blood coming out of the airway, whatever nastiness is coming out of the airway, if the patient is laying on his back, all that's going to come up and go right back down to his airway, breathing, getting pneumonia, things like that. So we can log roll the patient into the recovery position. Log roll the patient here. You can bend the knee. My patient's not going to really bend that well, but this knee's probably not going to bend. It's got a tourniquet on it. But log roll the patient on the side. That way the head's here, and if the patient vomits, throws up, it goes out the side. If you're looking to purchase any of these items for your trauma kit, your IFAK, you can go to shop.skinnymedic.com. That's going to help support the channel, support my family, so we appreciate it. Thank you guys for watching. You never know when you'll be the first responder. Remember the right gear and the right training. Another thing you can think about doing is while you're waiting on, I got my hand around his neck, my bad.